Well, Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
How is everybody?
Good.
Awesome.
Awesome. Okay, that's good. Yeah. Good to see everyone this morning. Gosh. I haven't seen you since the last year. Huh. Yeah. What announcements do we have today? Any announcements? Where's Becky? She's got an announcement.
Well, we've been talking about having new member Sunday next 2 weeks from now.
Yep.
We'll figure out what the virus says about where we do this. But just want to let you know a couple of the things that they might be getting, these new members. We have this special Unitarian Fellowship of the Carolina Foothills mug that they can drink coffee from to stay awake. And we have a pocket guide for UU ideas and principles and things, and it reminds you how we live and what's important to us. So those are a couple things. There might be another thing or two, that just pops up. But anyway, so the people who have told us already they want to be members, they can they'll get those and be celebrated in 2 weeks. And anybody can add themselves to the list. Really, all you need to do is tell us and sign a book and give to us in some way, either monetarily or energy or thoughts. And so tell somebody here. Tell Lyndon or Don, who sends the email. And if you want to be on an email list, speak to Don right here. So it's really fun being a member.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you, Becky.
Yeah.
We have, the fellowship is egalitarian, it's democratic, and we're all in this together, which is so refreshing. For me especially, I've been involved in faith communities with a pretty significant top-down hierarchy, and this, if anything, it's either horizontal or it's bottom-up, and I find that really refreshing. So we're so excited to welcome new members at our next gathering. We have some newcomers today. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourselves? Any newcomers? Yes?
Trevor Fisher here. Welcome. I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah. Welcome, Trevor. I'm glad you're here too. And where are you here from?
Portland, Maine.
Portland, Maine. That's quite a trek. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for coming this morning. Yeah. Who has our chalice lighter quotation today? Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Okay, so this one is from Sarah Van Brethnock. I don't know who she is, but I like what she said here. New Year's Day, a fresh start, a new chapter in life waiting to be written, new questions to be asked, embraced, and loved, answers to be discovered and then lived in this transformative year of delight and self-discovery. Today, carve out a quiet interlude for yourself in which to dream pen in hand. Only dreams give birth to true change. I do that every year. I think it's so important.
Yeah. Thank you. Beautiful. Let us say together, we light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. I have a song for you that I think just lifts my spirit, so I trust that it might yours as well as we say goodbye to 2021 and say hello to 2022.
Thank you.
Such a gorgeous rendition of that old song, right? Love that. It inspires me. No storm can shake my inmost calm when I hear the music ringing. It's an echo in my soul. It's so beautiful. Great words for these times. Turn to your neighbor and say, Happy New Year, I'm glad you're here.
Happy New Year. Glad you're here, Ellen.
I'm glad I'm here. Happy New Year, everybody.
And say to yourself, Happy New Year, I'm glad I'm here. Happy New Year, I'm glad I'm here.
I will.
I'm glad y'all are here too. I have a recipe for a Happy New Year I want to share with you. It's by an anonymous writer. I couldn't track down who wrote it. It's just listed as anonymous, so it's from one of the sages of the ages, I guess. Recipe for a Happy New Year. Take 12 fine, full-grown months. See that these are thoroughly free from old memories of bitterness, rancor, and hate. Cleanse them completely from every clinging spite. Pick off all specks of pettiness and littleness. In short, see that these months are freed from all the past. Have them fresh and clean as when they first came from the great storehouse of time itself. Cut these months into 30 or 31 equal parts. Do not attempt to make up the whole batch at one time. So many persons spoil the entire lot this way, but prepare it one day at a time. Into each day, put equal parts faith, patience, courage, and work. Some people omit this ingredient and so spoil the flavor of the rest. Hope, fidelity, liberality, kindness, rest. Leaving this out is like leaving the oil out of the salad dressing. Don't do it. Prayer, meditation, and one well-selected resolution. Put in about 1 teaspoonful of good spirits, a dash of fun, a pinch of folly, a sprinkling of play, and a heaping cupful of good humor. Yeah. Does anyone have a New Year's resolution you want to share? I'm glad to see we're all so ambitious. The operative word there was that you want to share. I fully realize you may not want to share your New Year's resolution. Anybody decided to give something up that they want to tell us about? Okay. Yeah. Well, let's think about that. Yeah,
I
Don.
want to give up some pounds.
I want to give up some pounds too. That's going to be my resolution. You know, I just can't decide which diet has bacon on it, you know. It's hard. It's hard. So Happy New Year. We're 2 days into 2022. We'll see how it goes. Endings and new beginnings inspire our thinking about new ways of being in the world, don't they? New Year's resolutions, changes of heart, promises we make to ourselves and others that we will or will not do certain things. I'm going on a diet. I plan to start meditating. This year I'm going to give up blank. This year I will blank. If you've ever watched the ball drop in New York City, either in person or on TV, you know at that very moment when the clock changes, magic mysteriously appears. Strangers embrace and kiss, and a downpour of confetti covers everyone. And people take a pause from drinking their champagne to join in a rousing rendition of a song that almost no one knows. It's called Auld Lang Syne. In thinking about today's sermon, I went searching for the meaning behind this familiar but little known song. Historians call it the song that nobody knows, but we all attempt to sing it on New Year's Eve, and we at least mouth some words that try to fit in with whatever the tune is. That's what I do. So what does Auld Lang Syne mean? Does anybody have an idea? Yeah, I didn't either. Auld Lang Syne, it turns out, is a key phrase in a poem by 18th century Scottish poet Robert Burns. It literally translates into old long since, but when we translate that for contemporary usage and understanding, it means the good old days or the good old times. Burns, the poet, attributed the poem to the Scottish oral tradition of folklore because it had been around probably about 200 years before. He says he merely wrote down what he heard from an older man. Auld Lang Syne. I can hear it now. I can see the ball coming down. I can see the confetti falling. I can hear people singing, reminiscing about the good old days. It happens to be a drinking song too, by the way. You have a drink and celebrate what you've been through together in the good old days of the year that has passed. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and Auld Lang Syne? For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne. Tugs at my heart, brings up a bit of nostalgia, makes me think about the good old days, the ones that actually happened and the ones that didn't, because memory is a strange thing, isn't it? The good old days. For some of us, some of the good old days weren't so good, and for others of us, they were better than we could have imagined. As I grow older, the passing of time and these year-end, year-beginning rituals have taken on more of a spiritual dimension for me. I've come to see that in our remembering, we find our meaning. Reflecting on how our lives have unfolded in the previous year and thoughts about our intentions for the future. Remember, we talked a while back about the Roman god Janus, from whom we get the name January. The Roman god Janus had two heads, one looking backwards, one looking forwards. So at this juncture in our calendar, we look back over the year that has passed and forward to the year ahead. In our remembering, in our embracing the good old times and the good old days and thinking about the days to come, we discover who we are. We are reminded of our essence, our culture, our heritage, our history. There's a beautiful scene in the show The Lion King. Have you guys seen The Lion King? Oh my gosh, what a great show. What a great show. My daughter Margaret loved it as a kid, the video of it that we had. But I got to see it in New York too, on Broadway, and oh my gosh, just incredible. But there's this one scene in which the Lion King, Mufasa, takes his cub Simba, his heir apparent, up onto a high plain at the edge of a cliff, looking out across the span of his whole kingdom. And as far as eyes could see, that's his kingdom. And he made this journey and took his cub Simba with him. He had one thing he wanted to teach his cub Simba, the heir apparent, the future Lion King. He sat him down and asked him to look out and gaze upon the kingdom. And then he said, Simba, remember who you are. Remember who you are. You are my son and the one true king. Remember who you are. That's important for all of us, right? We run into trouble with schizophrenia when we forget who we are. It's important for us to remember our heritage, our history, our upbringing, for good and for bad, because we all have a mix. How has my life unfolded? What have I learned from my parents, my family? What have I learned from my spiritual community? How have I, or how do I, serve a cause greater than myself? As a spiritual community, we talk a lot about the interconnectedness of all creation and the importance of justice. The word religion is a word from the Latin, re ligare. Ligare is the word for ligament. So re ligare is to tie back in this bonds of fellowship, our community together. We are tied together, and not tied together just for the benefit of ourselves, but for the benefit of the wider community. We are tied together. So How would I like to be remembered is a question that we often turn to at this time of year. And what is the spiritual culture and tradition and wisdom that I want to share with those who come behind me? What is the wisdom and the message and the kindness that we wish to share as a fellowship with our community moving forward? Psychologists refer to these concerns as legacy concerns. We've been shaped by our legacies, our parents and other significant others who've passed it on to us. And we also shape the legacies of our children and our family members and our friends and those who come behind us. To show you how important legacy is, take, for example, a Holocaust survivor's family. The children growing up in that family have an enormous legacy of horror on the one hand, but they also have an enormous legacy of courage and survival and hopefulness because they survived. Legacies shape us, just as our own legacies will shape those who come after us. I want to tell you one of my favorite stories. You might have heard it before, but I think it's so apropos. There was a chemist many years ago, spent a long time working in the field of explosives. His younger brother, who also worked with him, died one day in a terrible explosion in their factory. Grieving his brother's death, he decided to create a safer form of explosive, and so he created dynamite. Years later, his older brother died, and the newspaper in town made a huge mistake. Instead of writing an obituary for his older brother, the newspaper mistakenly wrote an obituary for the man himself. Now imagine waking up, looking for your brother's obituary in the paper, and seeing your own. That's a scary thought. Lots of times in my forgiveness classes, we'll do an exercise. I ask people to think about how you'd like to be remembered. What will your obituary say about you? And if it's not what you want it to be, you're still breathing. You can do something about it, just like this guy. So when he read his own obituary, he was shocked. As the obituary read, he would be remembered as a merchant of destruction, having created the chemical basis for the weapons of war. But in the words of that New Testament story about the prodigal son in the Gospel of Luke, he came to himself. He took an assessment of his life. He took an assessment of his legacy. He asked himself, is this who I want to be remembered as? What can I do differently? He decided to change course. From that point on, he used his great wealth, his accumulated wealth from the manufacturing of explosives, to work for the cause of peace in the world, for the betterment of humanity and creation. He established an award to honor individuals working for peace. You'll recognize his name, Alfred Nobel. Alfred Nobel started the Nobel Peace Prize, and luminaries for decades have been held up by his award. And most recently, in honor of Bishop Tutu, I'd like to mention him as one of the luminaries who died this past week. And what a sad thing for his passing, but you know, he was 91 and he lived a full, active, and significant and substantive life. And he leaves behind with us a legacy of courage and caring, compassion, and kindness. So, the good news is that we are here today and we're breathing, and if we have legacy adjustments we'd like to make, there's still time. That's a good thing. You know, I've always been drawn to the philosophical, the existentialist end of the philosophical spectrum. And there's a statue that I saw a long time ago that became one of my favorites because of that. It's at Brook Green Gardens, just outside of Myrtle Beach near Murrells Inlet. Any of you ever been to Brook Green Gardens? Okay, yeah. wow, it's spectacular. If you're ever in that area, you should go see it. It's 9,000 acres. It has several themed gardens and sculpture gardens, and there's also a zoo and lots of hiking trails. But the statue I want to tell you about is one by the sculptor Albin Polasek, who died in 1965. The sculpture is called Man Carving His Own Destiny. The statue is that of a powerful man who's carving out his own body from a stone block. He's all but completed his body. He's finishing his legs with tremendous effort. He raises hammer and chisel to carve his thighs out of this block of stone. It's so dramatic. I'll show you a picture. Man carving his own destiny. I think we're like that. We're carving our destiny too, aren't we? Creating our own legacy. What we do today contributes to our obituary, or how we will be remembered. So what are we creating? Maybe you've been crafting a spiritual legacy of love, compassion, and justice and kindness your whole life. Or maybe you've only recently found yourself in a spiritual path. Either way, there's time. We're still breathing. We can do something. I always remember Dr. King would give these speeches, these profound speeches, and every now and then he'd just do an aside and he'd say, you know, every one of you has had a birthday because you're here, right? Well, every one of you also, including myself, will have a death date. It's just what is. The biggest problem with life is none of us are going to get out alive. But the thing that separates the birth date and the death date is a little dash. And he would always ask the question, what are you going to do with your dash? We still have time. We're still breathing. So today, as we welcome in the new year, 2022, I invite you to think about one thing you might do to take better care of yourselves, or one thing you might do to contribute to a cause for peace and kindness in the world. Think about one thing that we might do together as a community of faith and fellowship and religious conviction about justice in the world. Let's think about one thing also that we might let go of, that no longer serves us. That's important too. The beautiful thing is, even as an older congregation, we are still creating, learning, thriving, and making a difference in the world. T.S. Eliot is one of my favorite poets, and when I was in my 20s, I almost had his 4 quartets memorized. I read them so much. There's this beautiful little few lines at the end of his poem, Little Gidding. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Isn't that beautiful? I've discovered that to be true in this journey of life. Ironically, I've come back home, in a way, because I grew up about an hour from here. But I've lived all over the place in between. Coming back home, it's mystical to me how I've reconnected with my roots of who I was and who I became and who I am becoming. About 6 years ago, I had the great privilege of going on a retreat, a spiritual retreat in the north of Ireland, in a place called County Clare, which is the home of the Irish poet and luminary John O'Donoghue. Maybe some of you have read some of his stuff. I really love his poetry. He was a PhD philosopher and a Catholic priest, so he had a lot of things going on. But most of all, he was a brilliant poet. While I was there in County Clare, I discovered that there was a poem, they told me anyway, that he was working on but never finished. And I fell in love with the poem, and it became a mantra for my life. I want to share it with you now. Just a little couple. I want to live my life as the river flows, surprised by its own unfolding. Just think about a river. There's so many turns, so many directions, so many places where the pressure of the water is greater than others. I want to live my life as the river flows, surprised by its own unfolding. Well, we have a year before us, and I'm sure before the end of it, we're going to be surprised at how it unfolds. Just as we were in 2019 and 2020 and 2021, 2022 has its own things ahead for us. We've had a couple of really challenging years with the epidemic and the former presidency and all the other crises du jour. You know, you can watch the news and it's pretty depressing. And we're not out of the woods yet with regard to this COVID stuff. The Omicron rates seem to be going up significantly. But we're here, still kicking. What will we do with that? What might we learn? How might we serve? And how can we keep from singing, you know? So what do you think? Anyone got a New Year's resolution now you might want to share? Any thoughts about all that? Any New Year's traditions that you have that you think might be interesting to the rest of us? Yeah, Janice.
Speaking of Janice, looking forward and backward, I started something last year because, for want of a better word, uncertain.
Uncertain.
Well, I could use some other adjectives, but they're not nice. So anyway,
Okay.
it was such a crazy year.
Yeah.
So anytime anything really good happened, I mean, every day we have blessings. I know that, and I'm very aware of it. But when something really special happened, a visit from somebody or a phone call from somebody we hadn't seen, I took a piece of paper and put it in a jar. So on New Year's Eve, we had a nice time going through a couple of them, and we do it all through New Year's Day too. Pick a couple of these memories, and then we sort of reminisce about what a fun time we had, or how this was interesting in our lives, or how we grew certain things. So I found it helpful, and I hope that's why I want to share.
What
it
a
with all of
beautiful
you.
tradition. Wow. I love that. It's so important to remember the good, because it's so easy only to see the bad. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other traditions that you have? How are you feeling about the beginning of 2022? Hopeful, optimistic, scared, and everything in between? Huh. Yeah. Yeah, me too. Me too. Well, let's wrap up, and then we'll have some coffee and continue our conversation. Let us say together, we extinguish the flame of this chalice. Let us follow the light of truth until we meet again.